Congress will continue to kick the can down the road on raising taxes until there comes a point in time beyond which they can no longer procrastinate raising taxes. The permanent extension of the Trump tax cuts really caught me off guard, and I study this stuff pretty closely every day. You're not supposed to be able to cut taxes permanently if they expand the debt too much over a 10-year window. And so everybody thought that if you cut the tax cuts, if you made the Trump tax cuts permanent, that there would be too much debt. They would have to do, through budget reconciliation, they would have to do an 8-year sunset, which is what they did back under Bush. But the Republicans sort of did a sleight of hand with some accounting maneuvering. And what they did was they basically said, look, we're gonna make like the Trump tax cuts were the new baseline. It would sort of be like going on vacation, spending $2,000 more per week in vacation, and then coming back home from vacation and saying, that's my new spending baseline. And you can't penalize me because I sort of got used to that level of spending while I was on vacation. So that's going to be my new normal. And so that's what they did. They made the case that the Trump tax cuts was sort of the new baseline, and any increased spending moving forward was not was sort of figured into the old model. And so they were able to permanently extend the Trump tax cuts, and you know the Bush tax cuts were permanent until they weren't. So what does it mean to have permanent tax cuts? It means that until some other administration takes over the White House and the hands change power changes hands in Congress, could be as early as 2028. We could see those tax cuts become no longer permanent. I've been talking about this in terms of a temporary permanent tax cut. Really, what I think, if I look into my crystal ball, what I think is going to happen is I think that the Congress will continue to kick the can down the road on raising taxes until there comes a point in time beyond which they can no longer procrastinate raising taxes. I think that's going to be in 2035. Why do I think it's going to be in 2035? Because at that point, if you take the $2 trillion per year we're adding over the next 10 years, plus the additional $5 trillion that we're going to add in debt because of the extension of the Trump tax cuts, that's going to put us at about $63 trillion of debt. Okay, that's a 140% debt to GDP ratio. Penn Wharton has recently come out with a study that says that if we don't right our fiscal ship of state by 2040, that no combination of raising taxes or reducing spending will arrest the financial collapse of our country. So I'm looking at debt to GDP of 140% in 2035. It could be as close to 200% in 2040. I think that's the window in which Congress has to act, and if they don't act, then there's just no getting out ahead of the debt snowball. And so I think that, knowing politicians like I do, they don't want to get voted out of office any sooner than they have to, and so they're going to continue to kick the can down the road and procrastinate. Remember, politicians, their number one job is to get reelected, and you don't get reelected by doing things like raising taxes or cutting spending. So I think that by 2035, we're going to see dramatic increases in tax rates. I'm not the only one who thinks this. David Walker, former Comptroller General of federal government, has said that tax rates have to double or we go broke as a nation. So all of this should put into sharp relief what we're thinking about in terms of tax strategy for retirement. Remember that the only way to truly shield yourself from the impact of higher taxes is to move your money to tax-free, okay? The cost of admission to getting into the tax-free bucket, where you sort of insulate yourself from the impact of higher taxes, is you got to be willing to pay a tax. So you can either pay that tax now at historically low tax rates, or you can roll the dice and sort of postpone the payment of those taxes till a point in the future when tax rates, most experts agree, are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. So I'm looking at sort of a 10-year window within which to get our sort of financial houses in order, pay tax, do so at historically low tax rates, so that by the time tax rates rise in 2035 and beyond, we've done all the heavy lifting and then can take that money out tax-free. But like I said, I was really blindsided by the permanent extension of these tax cuts. I thought we were going to get an 8-year extension. I think it's going to be about a 10-year extension when all the dust settles.
Dave, any final comments for our friends here today?
No, just I would just say that hopefully this conversation has instilled a bit of urgency. I like to tell people that every year that goes by, every year between now and 2035 represents a little mini window of opportunity during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And every year that goes by where you fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2035 where you could be forced to pay the highest tax rates you're likely to see in your lifetime. So I would just say, look, this is a historical opportunity. If ever there were a time in the history of our country to be taking advantage of these types of strategies, it's between now and 2035. So like I said, don't let a year go by where you're not taking advantage of these historically low tax rates. I'm convinced that once 2036 rolls around and tax rates go up, we'll look back at these tax rates as a good deal of historic proportions. And so, and that's why I always talk about where tax rates have been historically. A lot of people don't realize that in the last 2 years of World War II, the highest marginal tax rate was 94%. In 1960, the highest marginal tax rate was 89%. As recently as the 70s, it was 70%. We've spent most of our money earning years in historically low tax rates, and it's not, we can't even conceive of the idea that tax rates could be higher. But what we don't realize is they've been a lot higher before we came to the earth, and they'll likely be a lot higher after. And if you look at tax rates all across the world, we have among the lowest tax rates. But people say, Dave, you've been talking about tax rates going up forever, but they haven't gone up. They've actually gone down. I say, yeah, but the reason they've been able to stay down is because we're piling everything on the national credit card and we're growing the national debt by $2 trillion per year. If we weren't growing the national debt, we'd actually have to have increased tax rates. And so we can only throw money on the national credit card for so long. Eventually, tax rates will have to go up. And so my final call to action here is just take advantage of the next 10 years, because once it goes away, it's not coming back. Yeah. If you need help creating a balanced, comprehensive approach to tax-free retirement, head on over to davemcknight.com and click on the Connect with an Advisor button. I'm happy to refer you to an advisor in the Power Zero network that has been trained, vetted, and qualified personally by me. And if you found value in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another one. This is David McKnight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.